The Ecliptica hung in the void like a polished shard of obsidian, its angular hull glinting faintly in the light of a distant sun. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation, the kind that settles in your chest and refuses to let go. Captain Idris Kane paced the command deck, boots clicking softly against the metal floor. His crew, a mix of Earth's brightest minds and most battle-hardened soldiers, were gathered in the ship's central briefing room, waiting for him to speak. The mission briefing was already loaded on the holographic display, but Kane hesitated. It wasn't the complexity of the mission that gave him pause. He'd faced worse odds before. No, it was the company. "Captain," Lieutenant May Harrington whispered, leaning in, "they're waiting." I know," Kane muttered, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "Just trying to figure out how to introduce our guests without starting an interstellar incident." Harrington smirked. "Maybe don't mention the thing about their antennae being cute." Kane groaned. "One time, May. One time." Taking a deep breath, he strode into the briefing room. The assembled crew straightened as he entered, but their attention wasn't on him. It was on the group of Kareth warriors standing at the back of the room. The Kareth were a sight to behold. Tall, lithe, and otherworldly. Their skin shimmered like liquid metal, shifting hues with every movement, and their eyes glowed faintly like embers in the dark. They stood perfectly still, their posture rigid, their expressions unreadable. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kane began, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach, "welcome to the first joint operation between Earth Stellar Alliance and the Kareth Dominion. Our mission is to investigate a rogue planet near the Event Horizon Nebula. We believe it contains ancient technology that could stabilize interstellar travel routes." He paused, glancing at the Kareth delegation. Their leader, Commander Theva, stepped forward. Her presence was magnetic, her movements precise and deliberate. She surveyed the room with a gaze that seemed to pierce through walls. "Our cooperation," she said in flawless standard, her voice smooth and commanding, "is a testament to the potential of unity between our peoples. But make no mistake, this mission will test us all. Failure is not an option." Kane resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Of course, she had to outdo his speech. "Thank you, Commander," he said, forcing a smile. "Now, let's get down to specifics." As he launched into the details of the mission, the tension in the room was palpable. The humans and Kareth eyed each other warily, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Could they really work together? The tension finally broke during the first training simulation. The humans and Kareth were divided into mixed teams to practice navigating the rogue planet's unstable terrain. Kane found himself paired with Theva, which was not ideal. "Captain," Theva said, her tone clipped, "your approach to this exercise is inefficient." Kane raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I'm sorry, Commander. I didn't realize you were an expert in climbing holographic mountains." Theva's lips twitched, almost imperceptibly. "Perhaps you should focus less on sarcasm and more on not falling." As if on cue, Kane's foot slipped on a simulated rock, sending him sprawling. The humans in the room burst into laughter, and even the Kareth soldiers exchanged amused glances. Theva extended a hand to help him up, her expression neutral, but her eyes sparkling with what might have been amusement. "You're welcome," she said as he dusted himself off. Yeah, Kane muttered. "Next time, I'll let you handle the climbing." That evening, Kane found himself in the ship's mess hall, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted more like burnt rubber. The Kareth delegation had their own dining area, but Theva surprised him by entering the human section. "Commander," he said, gesturing to the empty seat across from him, "what brings you to our humble cafeteria?" Theva sat down gracefully, her movements impossibly smooth. "Curiosity," she said simply. Kane raised an eyebrow. "About our food? Fair warning, it's terrible." Theva tilted her head, studying him. "About you, Captain, your leadership style is unconventional." "Is that a compliment or an insult?" Her lips curved into a faint smile. "An observation." Kane chuckled. Fair enough. And what about you? Always so serious, or is that just for show? Theva's smile widened, just a fraction. Perhaps you will find out. Their conversation was interrupted by Lieutenant Harrington, who approached with a tray of what passed for dessert aboard the Ecliptica. Captain, you've got to try this pudding. It's pudding adjacent. Kane took a bite and immediately grimaced. Tastes like sadness. Theva raised an eyebrow. Sadness has a taste? Trust me, Kane said, pushing the tray away. You don't want to find out. To his surprise, Theva laughed, a soft, melodic sound that caught him off guard. It was the first time he'd seen her let her guard down, even for a moment. As the ship prepared to enter the Event Horizon Nebula, the crew's initial unease began to fade. The humans and Kareth weren't exactly friends, but they were starting to find common ground, sometimes literally as in the case of the pudding fiasco. Kane stood on the observation deck, watching the swirling colors of the nebula approach. Theva joined him, her expression unreadable as always. Beautiful, isn't it? Kane said. It is, Theva agreed. And dangerous. Kane glanced at her. You know, you're allowed to enjoy things without reminding everyone how deadly they are. Theva's lips twitched. Perhaps, but where would the fun be in that? Kane chuckled, shaking his head. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope that this mission might actually succeed. The Ecliptica shuddered as it entered the rift space surrounding the rogue planet. The ship's artificial gravity hiccuped, causing trays, tools, and at least one unfortunate sandwich to float momentarily before slamming back down. Captain Idris Kane clutched the edge of the command console, his coffee mug somehow defying physics to remain upright. Well, that's comforting, he muttered, staring at the swirling, chaotic expanse outside the viewport. Rift space wasn't like normal space. It was alive, unpredictable and thoroughly unpleasant. Lieutenant May Harrington appeared beside him, holding a scanner that was blinking far too enthusiastically for Kane's liking. Good news, Captain. The ship's holding steady. Bad news. The rift's gravitational anomalies are spiking, and the engines are at 120% output, just to keep us from spinning like a drunk top. Excellent, Kane said dryly. I always wanted to see what our ship looked like as modern art. Harrington smirked, but didn't respond. Instead, her gaze flicked to the Kareth delegation, who stood near the back of the bridge, unflinching despite the turbulence. Commander Theva, ever the picture of composure, stepped forward. Your vessel is impressive, she said, her tone neutral, but her glowing eyes betraying a hint of curiosity. Kane raised an eyebrow. Is that a compliment, or a polite way of saying we're one bump away from turning into space debris? Theva's lips twitched. Both. Before Kane could reply, the ship lurched violently, sending him stumbling into a console. The Kareth, naturally, remained perfectly upright, their balance unaffected. Do you all have magnets in your boots or something? Kane grumbled, steadying himself. No, Theva replied smoothly. We simply have superior equilibrium. Of course you do, Kane muttered under his breath. The turbulence finally eased as the Ecliptica reached the rogue planet's orbit. The view from the observation deck was breathtaking, a fractured world of jagged continents suspended over molten seas, its surface glowing faintly from the heat of its unstable core. It's like someone took a planet and decided to break it into a puzzle, Harrington said, her voice tinged with awe. Yeah, Kane replied. A puzzle with pieces that explode if you step on them wrong. The briefing room was soon abuzz with activity as the joint team prepared for the descent. The humans and Kareth worked side by side, their interactions a mix of awkward silences and cautious cooperation. Kane found himself standing next to Theva as they reviewed the mission plan. The holographic display projected a 3D map of the planet's surface, highlighting the labyrinthine structure they were tasked with exploring. Your technology is rudimentary, Theva remarked, tilting her head as she examined the display. Kane smirked. Rudimentary? I'll have you know this is top-of-the-line human ingenuity. Thiva's glowing eyes flicked to him. It resembles a child's toy. Then I guess we're about to play the most dangerous game of hide-and-seek in the galaxy, Kane quipped. Thiva's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. Let us hope you are better at seeking than joking. The descent to the planet's surface was harrowing. The shuttle rattled violently as it pushed through the atmosphere, the heat shields glowing red-hot. Kane gripped his harness tightly, casting a sidelong glance at Thava, who sat beside him, calm as ever. "Do you ever get nervous?" he asked, his voice raised over the roar of the engines. "No," she replied without hesitation. "Not even a little?" Thava's gaze shifted to him, her expression unreadable. "Fear is a distraction. I prefer to focus on the task at hand." Kane snorted. "Well, I prefer to focus on not dying, but to each their own." The shuttle finally touched down on the planet's surface with a bone-jarring thud. The team disembarked into a landscape that was equal parts stunning and terrifying. Jagged spires of obsidian-like rock jutted from the ground, glowing faintly with geothermal heat. The air was thick and oppressive, tinged with the metallic scent of minerals. "Welcome to scenic nowhere," Kane said, gesturing to the desolate expanse. "I hope you all packed your sunscreen." The first few hours of exploration were uneventful, save for the occasional grumble from the human soldiers about the oppressive heat. The Kareth, unsurprisingly, seemed unaffected. As the team approached the entrance to the labyrinth, a massive chasm that seemed to descend into the planet's core, the tension began to rise. The air was charged with energy, the kind that made the hairs on the back of Kane's neck stand on end. "Scanners are picking up some strange readings," Harrington reported, her voice tight. "Electromagnetic interference, seismic activity, and something else. I can't quite pinpoint it." "Something else?" Kane repeated, frowning. "That's not ominous at all." Thava stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the chasm. "We proceed with caution. This structure was not designed for our safety." "No kidding," Kane muttered. As the team descended into the labyrinth, the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. The walls were lined with intricate carvings that pulsed faintly with light, their patterns shifting as if alive. "This place is giving me the creeps," one of the human soldiers muttered. "Relax," Kane said. "It's just an ancient, possibly haunted alien death trap. What's the worst that could happen?" Thava glanced at him. "Your attempts at humor are unique. Unique good or unique bad?" She didn't answer, but the faintest flicker of amusement crossed her face. By the time the team reached the first chamber, the tension had eased slightly, thanks in no small part to Kane's relentless and often terrible jokes. The chamber was vast, its walls covered in glowing symbols that seemed to hum with energy. "This is it," Harrington said, her voice filled with wonder. "The technology we're looking for has to be here." Kane stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the room. "Well, let's hope it's not booby-trapped. I'd hate to end this mission with a bang." Thava's voice cut through the silence. "Captain, if you trigger a trap, I will ensure you are the first to experience its effects." Kane grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." For the first time, Thava allowed herself a genuine smile, brief but unmistakable, and for a moment, amidst the danger and uncertainty, the two of them stood on the edge of something new, a partnership forged in the unlikeliest of places. The labyrinth was alive. That much became apparent as soon as the team stepped deeper into the ancient structure. The walls shimmered faintly, their carvings pulsating in a rhythm that felt disturbingly like a heartbeat. "Is it just me, or does this place feel like it's watching us?" Lieutenant May Harrington whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the glowing symbols. "It's not just you," Kane replied, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm. "If this place had eyes, they'd be staring right at us." Thava, who had been studying the carvings with a mixture of fascination and wariness, glanced over her shoulder. The technology here is beyond anything your species has encountered. It is sentient in a way. Great, Kane muttered. We're walking through a giant alien brain. What could possibly go wrong? The Kareth commander raised an eyebrow. Your humor is persistent, Captain. I wonder if it will serve you well when the labyrinth decides to test us. Test us? Harrington asked, her brow furrowing. Theva gestured to the shifting symbols. These markings are not decorative. They are part of a system designed to evaluate intruders, to determine if we are worthy. Worthy of what? Kane asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. Theva's gaze lingered on the carvings. Survival. The first test came in the form of a door, or rather what appeared to be a door. It was a massive circular slab of metal embedded in the wall, its surface covered in glowing patterns that shifted and reformed like liquid. Looks simple enough, Kane said, stepping forward. We just need to... Before he could finish, the door emitted a low hum, and the symbols flared to life. A holographic projection appeared, depicting a series of complex equations and geometric shapes that floated in midair. Harrington groaned. Oh no, it's a puzzle. Theva tilted her head, studying the projection. A test of intellect. Primitive but effective. Primitive? Kane said, raising an eyebrow. I don't see you solving it. Theva didn't respond. Instead, she reached out, her fingers moving through the holographic shapes with practiced precision. The symbols shifted and rearranged themselves, forming a new pattern that pulsed with a soft, golden light. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a dark corridor beyond. Well, that was easy, Kane said, grinning. Theva gave him a sidelong glance. Do not mistake the first test for the last, Captain. The labyrinth is only beginning to awaken. The humor helped. It always did. As the team ventured deeper into the labyrinth, the tension ebbed and flowed like the shifting light on the walls. Kane kept the mood light with a steady stream of quips, most of which earned groans from his human crew, and the occasional bemused glance from Theva. So, what do you think the ancient aliens who built this place were like? Kane asked, as they navigated a narrow passageway. Efficient, Theva replied without hesitation. Efficient? She nodded. Their technology is flawless. Their designs are elegant. They left no room for error. Kane smirked. Sounds like a fun bunch. Bet their parties were wild. Theva's lips twitched. If they had parties, Captain, I doubt you would have been invited. Ouch, Kane said, clutching his chest in mock offense. That hurts, Commander. The second test was far less intellectual and far more terrifying. The team entered a cavernous chamber filled with floating platforms, each one glowing faintly against the abyss below. The air was heavy with static, and the faint hum of energy filled their ears. I don't like this, Harrington said, eyeing the platforms warily. Join the club, Kane muttered. So, what's the catch? As if in response, the first platform lit up, and a beam of light shot out, forming a narrow bridge to the next. The light flickered, then stabilized. Looks like we have to cross, Theva said, her tone calm but her posture tense. Of course we do, Kane said, because nothing says welcome like a death-defying obstacle course. The first few platforms were stable enough, though the team quickly discovered that they only supported one person at a time. Harrington nearly lost her balance when a platform began to tilt, and Kane had to grab her arm to steady her. Careful, he said, grinning. I'd hate to lose my best lieutenant to a glowing trampoline. Thanks, Captain, Harrington said, rolling her eyes. Your concern is touching. Halfway across, the labyrinth decided to up the ante. The platforms began to move, shifting positions in midair with alarming speed. Okay, this is officially not fun anymore, Kane said as he leapt to a platform that was already sliding away. Theva, who was ahead of him, landed gracefully on the next platform. Perhaps you should focus less on commentary and more on not falling, Captain. Thanks for the advice, Kane said, panting as he scrambled onto the next platform. "I'll be sure to put that in my memoirs." Despite the chaos, the team managed to reach the other side, though not without a few close calls. Kane collapsed onto the solid ground, breathing heavily. "Remind me to thank whoever designed this place," he said, preferably with a strongly worded letter. Theva extended a hand to help him up. "If you survive, Captain, I will deliver it personally." The chamber beyond the platforms was eerily quiet, the air heavy with anticipation. The walls were covered in even more intricate carvings, their light dim and subdued. "This feels like the calm before the storm," Harrington said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kane nodded, his gaze sweeping the room. "Let's hope it's just the calm. I've had enough storms for one day." Theva stepped forward, her eyes scanning the carvings. "The labyrinth is testing more than our physical and intellectual abilities. It is testing our resolve, our unity." "Unity, huh?" Kane said, glancing at the humans and Kareth around him. "Well, we're not dead yet, so I'd say we're doing okay." Theva's lips curved into a faint smile. "For now." As the team prepared to move deeper into the labyrinth, Kane couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, not by the carvings or the walls, but by something far older and far more dangerous. "Well," he said, forcing a grin, "let's see what else this place has in store. After all, it'd be rude to leave without saying hello to our hosts." Theva's gaze lingered on him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a nod, she led the way into the unknown. The corridor beyond the third chamber was disorienting, an endless spiral of light and sound. The walls shimmered with colors that defied description, shifting in patterns that seemed to twist space itself. Every step felt both too heavy and too light, as though the labyrinth were playing tricks on gravity. "This place is like walking through a lava lamp," Kane said, eyeing the swirling walls. "A very angry lava lamp." "I fail to see the humor in this," Theva replied, her tone clipped as she studied the path ahead. "That's because you're not picturing a lava lamp. Very retro, very chic." "You'd love it," Kane quipped, earning a smirk from Harrington. "Perhaps your levity serves as a coping mechanism," Theva mused, her voice tinged with mild curiosity. "Or maybe I'm just funny," Kane shot back, grinning. Harrington muttered under her breath, "Debatable." Yet the team pressed on, their steps echoing in the strange, infinite corridor. Occasionally, the labyrinth would hum, the sound vibrating through their bones. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was unsettling, as though the structure were attempting to communicate. "What do you think it's saying?" Harrington asked, her gaze fixed on the glowing walls. Theva stopped abruptly, tilting her head. "It is not saying. It is listening." Kane frowned. "Listening to what?" "To us?" Theva replied simply. "Well, I hope it likes bad jokes," Kane muttered, "because that's all I've got." The Kareth commander turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You underestimate the labyrinth, Captain. Humor may yet prove valuable." "See?" Kane said, nudging Harrington. "Even the alien thinks I'm funny." The next chamber was a stark contrast to the kaleidoscopic corridor. It was a vast, circular room with a domed ceiling that stretched high above them. The walls were covered in glyphs that pulsed in a slow, deliberate rhythm, like a heartbeat. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, its surface smooth and reflective. Hovering above it was a sphere of shimmering light, its glow so intense that it seemed to push back the shadows. "What's that?" Harrington asked, shielding her eyes. "A test," Theva said, stepping forward. "Of course it is," Kane said, sighing. "Let me guess, it's going to make us fight each other or something equally dramatic." Theva ignored him, her attention focused on the sphere. "This is a test of connection. The labyrinth seeks to understand our intent, our unity." "Unity," Harrington repeated. "We're barely on speaking terms." Theva turned to face the group. Precisely why this test is critical. We must work together to succeed. Kane raised an eyebrow. And if we don't? The Kareth commander's gaze was steady. Then we do not leave this chamber. The test began the moment Theva approached the pedestal. The sphere flared brightly, and the glyphs on the walls shifted, their patterns rearranging into something new. The hum of the labyrinth grew louder, resonating through the chamber. Kane felt a pressure in his chest, as though the air itself were trying to squeeze the life out of him. Is it just me, or is the room getting heavier? It's not just you, Harrington replied, her voice strained. Theva placed her hands on the pedestal, and the sphere reacted instantly, expanding into a holographic display that filled the room. It showed a series of interconnected nodes, each one glowing faintly. This is the network, Theva explained. We must align the nodes to stabilize the system. Kane frowned. And how do we do that? The Kareth commander didn't answer. Instead, she began moving her hands through the holographic display, her movements precise and deliberate. The nodes shifted in response, their glow intensifying. Okay, that looks easy enough, Kane said, stepping forward. The moment he touched the display, the entire room shuddered. The nodes flickered wildly, their light dimming. Captain, Theva said sharply, your interference is disrupting the system. Great, Kane muttered. I break ancient alien puzzles now. Add that to my resume. As the team worked to align the nodes, the labyrinth threw everything it had at them. The walls pulsed with blinding light, and the floor seemed to ripple like water. Is it supposed to do that? Harrington asked, gesturing to the undulating floor. I highly doubt it, Theva replied, her focus unwavering. Fantastic, Kane said. Now we're surfing in an alien death trap. This just keeps getting better. Despite the chaos, the team began to find a rhythm. Theva's calm precision balanced Kane's improvisation, and Harrington's quick thinking bridged the gap between their vastly different approaches. At one point, the sphere emitted a low, rumbling sound that made Kane freeze. Is that a good noise or a bad noise? Neutral, Theva replied. Neutral? Kane repeated. That doesn't sound reassuring. The Kareth commander's lips twitched. Then I suggest you focus, Captain. After what felt like an eternity, the final node clicked into place, and the room fell silent. The sphere pulsed brightly, then collapsed into a single point of light that hovered above the pedestal. Well, Kane said, wiping sweat from his brow, that was fun. Let's never do it again. Theva stepped back, her expression thoughtful. The labyrinth has deemed us worthy, for now. For now? Harrington asked, her voice tinged with exhaustion. The tests will only grow more difficult, Theva said. We must remain vigilant. Kane groaned. Great, more tests. I can't wait. Despite his sarcasm, there was a flicker of respect in his gaze as he looked at Theva. For all her stoicism, she had proven to be a capable and steady leader, a fact that, much to his surprise, he found himself appreciating. As the team prepared to move on, the walls of the chamber shifted, revealing a new passageway. The air was cooler now, the oppressive weight of the labyrinth momentarily lifted. Let's hope the next room has snacks, Kane said as they stepped into the corridor. Harrington snorted. You think ancient aliens had vending machines? Hey, a guy can dream, Kane replied with a grin. Theva glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Your optimism is peculiar. Peculiar good or peculiar bad? Kane asked. She didn't answer, but there was a hint of amusement in her glowing eyes. As they ventured deeper into the labyrinth, Kane couldn't shake the feeling that they were being guided, not just by the labyrinth, but by something far greater. And for the first time, he found himself wondering not just how they would survive, but why they had been chosen. The new corridor was unlike anything they'd encountered so far. It was narrow, almost claustrophobically so, with walls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The air was still, carrying a faint metallic tang that made Kane's skin crawl. "Is it just me, or is this place getting creepier by the second?" he asked, his voice echoing faintly. "It is not just you," Harrington replied, her hand resting on her weapon. "This place feels wrong." Theva paused, her sharp eyes scanning the corridor ahead. "The labyrinth adapts. It senses our unease and amplifies it." "Great," Kane muttered. "An alien funhouse with a mean streak, just what we needed." Despite his attempts to lighten the mood, even Kane couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The walls seemed to shift when he wasn't looking, and the faint hum that had accompanied them throughout the labyrinth had grown into a low, almost imperceptible whisper. The whisper became a voice as they reached the next chamber. It was a vast, circular room with a floor of polished black stone that reflected the faint glow of the glyphs on the walls. In the center of the room was a column of swirling energy, its light casting eerie shadows across the chamber. The voice spoke as they entered, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Why do you seek the heart of the labyrinth?" Kane froze, his hand instinctively going to his weapon. Did anyone else hear that?" "We all heard it," Harrington said, her voice tight. Theva stepped forward, her posture calm but alert. "The labyrinth is speaking to us. It is rare for it to communicate directly." "Well, I'd prefer it stick to creepy whispers," Kane said. "This is way too personal." The voice spoke again, louder this time. "Answer. Why do you seek the heart?" Theva glanced at Kane, her expression unreadable. "It requires an answer." Kane hesitated, then stepped forward. "We're here because we have a mission, to understand, to survive." The voice rumbled with what might have been amusement. "Understanding is earned. Survival is fleeting. Prove your worth." The column of energy flared brightly, and the room began to change. The polished floor rippled like liquid, and the walls dissolved into a swirling void. "Oh, come on," Kane groaned. "Can't we just have one room that doesn't try to kill us?" The void solidified into a new environment, a dense jungle, its trees towering high above them. The air was thick with humidity, and the sound of distant creatures echoed through the foliage. "This isn't real," Harrington said, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "It's some kind of simulation." "Real enough to hurt us," Theva said, her tone grim. As if on cue, the ground beneath their feet trembled, and a massive creature emerged from the trees. It was a towering, insect-like beast with gleaming black carapace and razor-sharp limbs that glinted in the dim light. "Well," Kane said, drawing his weapon, "I guess we're proving our worth the old-fashioned way." The battle was chaotic and brutal. The creature moved with terrifying speed, its limbs slicing through the air with deadly precision. Kane fired his plasma pistol, the shot striking the creature's carapace, but barely leaving a mark. "Okay, not working. Suggestions?" "Aim for the joints," Theva shouted, her own weapon firing bursts of blue energy. Harrington nodded, switching her aim to the creature's legs. Her shots found their mark, and the beast let out an ear-splitting screech as one of its limbs buckled. "Nice shot," Kane called, dodging a swipe from the creature's remaining limbs. "Thanks," Harrington said, her tone dry. "Now let's not die before I can do it again." Theva moved with precision, her energy blade slicing through the creature's defenses. She was a blur of motion, her movements almost graceful despite the chaos around her. Kane couldn't help but marvel at her skill. "Remind me not to get on your bad side," he said as he fired another shot. Theva didn't respond, but there was a flicker of amusement in her eyes as she landed a critical blow to the creature's abdomen. And the battle ended with the creature collapsing to the ground, its body dissolving into the same swirling energy as the column in the previous chamber. The jungle around them faded, and they were back in the circular room. The voice spoke again, its tone calmer this time. "You are stronger than you appear, But strength alone is not enough. Yeah, we kind of figured that out already, Kane said, breathing heavily. The voice ignored him, continuing, "The heart of the labyrinth is not for the faint of spirit. Proceed, and you will face your greatest challenge yet." The column of energy flared once more, revealing a new passageway. "Well, that sounds ominous," Harrington said, wiping sweat from her brow. Kane nodded. "Ominous is kind of the theme here, isn't it?" Theva stepped forward, her expression resolute. "We must continue. The labyrinth will not wait." Kane glanced at her, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "You really don't back down, do you?" Theva met his gaze, her tone steady. "Backing down is not an option, Captain. Not for any of us." As they entered the new passageway, the air grew colder, and the light from the glyphs dimmed. The team moved in silence, the weight of the labyrinth's words hanging heavy over them. Kane broke the tension with a grin. "So, anyone want to guess what our greatest challenge yet is going to be? My money's on a giant lava monster." Harrington rolled her eyes. "You're not helping." "Hey, if we're going to die, we might as well do it with a smile," Kane said. Theva glanced at him, her expression softening ever so slightly. "Perhaps your humor will serve us well, Captain. The labyrinth values resilience." Kane smirked. "See? She gets it." Despite his bravado, Kane couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than anything they'd faced so far. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if humor would be enough to see them through. The passageway led to a chamber unlike any they had seen before. It was vast and hollow, its walls polished to a mirror-like finish that reflected the team's every movement. The air was cool, almost cold, and carried a faint metallic tang. Above them, the ceiling seemed to stretch endlessly into darkness, and the only source of light was the soft glow of glyphs embedded in the mirrored walls. "Well," Kane said, his voice breaking the heavy silence, "this is cozy. Nothing says welcome like an infinite hall of creepy reflections." Harrington glanced at her reflection, which seemed to stare back at her with unsettling intensity. "I don't like this. It's too quiet." "Agreed," Theva said, her voice low. "This chamber is designed to disorient and unnerve. The labyrinth seeks to test our resolve." "Great," Kane muttered. "Another test. Can't we just get a pop quiz for once? Something quick and painless?" Theva arched an eyebrow. "The labyrinth is not known for simplicity, Captain." As they ventured deeper into the chamber, the mirrored walls began to shift. The reflections no longer moved in sync with their counterparts. Kane's reflection lingered behind him, staring after him with an expression that didn't match his own. Harrington's reflection seemed to smirk when she wasn't. "Okay, that's not creepy at all," Kane said, stepping away from his reflection. "Why do I feel like they're judging us?" "They are not judging," Theva said, studying the shifting reflections. "They are observing. Learning." "Learning what?" Harrington asked. Theva's glowing eyes narrowed. "Our weaknesses." And the team pressed on, the tension thick in the air. The mirrored walls seemed to close in around them, and the glyphs began to pulse with a faint rhythmic glow. The reflections grew more distorted, their movements increasingly erratic. At one point, Kane's reflection grinned at him, its expression unnervingly wide. "Okay, nope," he said, turning away. "I don't need to see that." "Captain," Theva said sharply, "focus. The labyrinth is attempting to distract us." "Yeah, well, it's doing a great job," Kane muttered. The chamber suddenly shifted, the floor beneath their feet rippling like water. The reflections began to step out of the mirrors, their forms solidifying into shadowy, humanoid figures. "Oh, come on," Kane groaned, drawing his weapon. "We're fighting ourselves now? That's just lazy writing." Harrington snorted despite herself. "I don't think the labyrinth cares about narrative structure, Kane." The shadowy figures attacked without warning, their movements eerily fluid and unpredictable. They mimicked the team's fighting styles, their attacks precise and relentless. Kane fired his plasma pistol, the shots tearing through his doppelganger but leaving no lasting damage. Okay, that's not fair. How do you kill something that doesn't stay dead? Focus on the glyphs, Theva shouted, her energy blade slicing through one of the shadow figures. They are the source of the projections. Harrington nodded, switching her aim to the glowing glyphs on the walls. Her shots struck true, and the glyphs flickered before dimming. One of the shadow figures dissolved into mist, its form dissipating into the air. Nice work, Kane called, dodging an attack from his reflection. Let's take out the rest. The battle was intense, the team working in unison to destroy the glyphs. Despite their best efforts, the shadow figures continued to multiply, their movements growing more aggressive with each passing moment. This isn't working, Harrington shouted, her voice strained. There are too many of them. Theva's gaze darted around the chamber, her mind racing. The central glyph, she said, pointing to a large glowing symbol on the far wall. It is the core. Destroy it, and the others will fall. On it, Kane said, sprinting toward the central glyph. The shadow figures swarmed him, their attacks relentless. Kane ducked and weaved, his plasma pistol firing wildly as he closed the distance. Keep them off me, he shouted. Harrington and Theva moved to cover him, their weapons cutting through the shadow figures with deadly precision. Almost there, Kane called, reaching the central glyph. He raised his plasma pistol, aiming carefully. Say goodnight, creepy mirror room. With a single, well-placed shot, the glyph shattered, its light extinguished. The shadow figures froze, their forms dissolving into mist. The chamber fell silent, the oppressive weight lifting from the air. The mirrored walls shimmered, their surfaces rippling like water. The reflections returned to normal, their movements once again mirroring the team's. Well, Kane said, catching his breath, that was fun. Let's never do it again. Theva stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. The labyrinth grows more cunning with each challenge. It seeks to exploit our fears, our doubts. Yeah, well, joke's on it, Kane said with a grin. I'm already a mess of fears and doubts. Nothing new there. Harrington chuckled. That's surprisingly self-aware for you, Kane. Hey, I'm full of surprises, he replied. As they exited the chamber, the air grew warmer, and the light from the glyphs brightened. The new passageway was wider, its walls lined with intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story. Theva paused, studying the carvings. These depict the trials of the labyrinth's creators. They too faced challenges to prove their worth. Kane raised an eyebrow. And did they make it? Theva's expression was somber. Few did. Great, Kane said, his tone dry. Real motivational, Theva. Despite his sarcasm, there was a flicker of determination in his eyes as he looked ahead. The challenges were growing more dangerous, but so was their resolve. For the first time, Kane felt a strange sense of purpose, a feeling that they weren't just surviving the labyrinth, but becoming something greater in the process. And as they ventured deeper into its depths, he couldn't shake the feeling that the labyrinth was watching, waiting for them to prove themselves worthy of its ultimate secret. The final chamber revealed itself with a suddenness that caught them all off guard. One moment, they were trudging through another dimly lit passage, the walls whispering faintly of unseen dangers. The next, they were standing in a vast circular room bathed in golden light. The walls shimmered like liquid metal, and the air hummed with an energy that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. At the center of the chamber was a massive crystalline structure, its facets refracting light into a kaleidoscope of colors. The glyphs on the walls pulsed in time with the crystalline heart's glow, creating a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Wow, Kane said, his voice filled with awe. I was expecting something more sinister, like a giant death laser or a pit of lava, but this is beautiful. Harrington nodded, her usually stern expression softening. It's alive, in a way. Theva stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the crystalline heart. This is the core of the labyrinth. Its essence. Everything we have faced was designed to lead us here. Well, mission accomplished, Kane said, spreading his arms. We found the big shiny thing, now what? As if in response to his question, the crystalline heart began to pulse faster, its light growing brighter. A voice filled the chamber, deep and resonant, yet strangely gentle. You have reached the heart. You have faced your fears, your doubts, your flaws. Now you must decide. Decide what? Harrington asked, her hand instinctively moving to her weapon. The labyrinth offers a choice, to take its knowledge and power, or to leave it untouched. Each path has its cost. Choose wisely. Kane glanced at Theva. Any idea what happens if we say, thanks, but no thanks? Theva shook her head, her expression unreadable. The labyrinth's trials are not meant to kill, but to transform. The choice is ours to make, but the consequences are unknown. Great, Kane muttered. I love a good mystery with life-altering stakes. The team gathered near the heart, its glow casting their faces in shades of gold and amber. Harrington broke the silence. If we take its power, we could gain knowledge beyond anything humanity has ever seen. We could change everything. Or we could destroy everything, Kane countered. Who's to say we can even handle it? Look at what we've been through just to get here. Theva spoke softly, her voice steady. The labyrinth does not give lightly. Its power is not a gift. It is a burden. But it can also be a bridge, a way to unite our peoples. Kane sighed, running a hand through his hair. No pressure or anything. As the team debated, the crystalline heart began to emit faint images, visions of their journey through the labyrinth. Kane saw himself fumbling with alien technology, cracking jokes to mask his fear. He saw the way Theva had watched him, her sharp gaze softening with every small act of bravery. Harrington saw her own transformation, the way she had learned to trust her instincts and her team, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Theva saw the moments when her rigid discipline had given way to something deeper, a connection to her human companions that she hadn't thought possible. The visions faded, leaving them in silence once more. Finally, Kane spoke. Look, I'm not exactly the hero type. I'm the guy who screws up and hopes for the best. But if there's one thing I've learned in this labyrinth, it's that we don't get through anything alone. We're stronger together. Human, alien, whatever. He turned to Theva, his expression earnest. You said this place is about transformation, right? Maybe that's the real point, not the power, but what we've become by getting here. Theva nodded slowly, her gaze thoughtful. Perhaps you are right, Captain. The labyrinth has already given us its greatest gift, a chance to understand one another. Harrington smiled faintly. For once I agree with Kane. Let's leave the big shiny thing alone. We've got what we came for. The crystalline heart pulsed one last time, its light dimming as if in acknowledgement of their choice. You have chosen wisely. The labyrinth's power remains, but its wisdom is yours. Go now, and carry what you have learned beyond these walls. The chamber began to dissolve, the walls shimmering and fading into nothingness. The team found themselves standing at the edge of the labyrinth, the alien sky stretching out before them. The journey back to their respective ships was quiet, but filled with a sense of accomplishment. As they prepared to part ways, Kane turned to Theva. So, I guess this is goodbye. For now, Theva said, a small smile playing at her lips. But our paths may cross again, Captain. Kane grinned. You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm going to miss your terrifying combat skills and your unsettling ability to read my mind. Theva chuckled softly, a rare sound that made Kane's grin widen. And I will miss your unique sense of humor, Captain. It is strangely endearing. Strangely endearing, Kane repeated, shaking his head. I'll take it. As the human and alien ships departed, the labyrinth loomed behind them, its secrets intact. Kane leaned back in his seat, watching the alien world shrink into the distance. "So, what's next?" Harrington smirked, hopefully something less life-threatening. "Yeah," Kane said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "But where's the fun in that?" And as the stars stretched out before them, Kane couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of a much larger journey, one filled with danger, discovery, and maybe even a few more laughs along the way.